Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another reading vlog. More specifically, welcome to Shelf Control, the very first episode of this new series I've been kind of rattling around in my brain for about a year. The idea being that I really want to read down my physical TBR, so I want to make a concerted effort to prioritize the books that I already own and specifically bring to mind things that I've kind of forgotten that I have or things that I wouldn't otherwise prioritize. So that's the goal of the series, and for each episode I hope to find a new way to pick books off of my TBR so that it's always kind of fresh and new and interesting. For this first episode I decided to have my partner pick some books for me. This was originally planned to come out in January, so he was going to be doing this for my birthday when he was visiting that weekend. Things got kind of hectic and crazy. I was not reading very much in January. I was slumping really hard, and then I did actually already try to film this vlog once, and I just had it fall apart because I started getting ready to move. The kind of move was a little bit sudden. We didn't know exactly when we were going to be moving, and it was much earlier than we anticipated. It was kind of dependent on when a unit came open at the complex that we were looking at, and it did, and now we very quickly had to get stuff packed up and ready to go. So that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks, and things have just been a little bit crazy around that, but I am feeling more prepared now. We are into February. I'm thinking this video is going to come out sometime in March probably, and we'll kind of go from there. After that, hopefully everything will settle out and we can have episodes of this a little bit more regularly. But for now, let's pop over and see what Jacob chose for me to read.
Whoa, sentient curtains. Yeah, it's me, Jacob. Hope has brought me in to help her choose 3 books for this upcoming month for her to read. That way she can get some of these books off of her unread shelf. So what we're doing is we have a shelf over here, a shelf over here, and a tree shelf right here on the floor. And I figured the best way to do this is to just pick one from each. And I already know which one I'm picking off of this shelf, which is, come here, Ninth House, Leigh Bardugo. I hope I said that name correctly. Anyway, yeah, I've heard funny things about this book. I know that it was very popular when it first came out. It is, again, I've heard some interesting, thoughts about this book. I'm struggling with words, so you'll have to excuse me. But yeah, no, I've always thought the cover looked cool, and I've heard a lot that this was very talked about when it came out, so I figured this would be a good book to start with. That's book hitting the couch sound. Anyway, let's move over here. In this one, I also know which one I'm going to give her. Well, let's... Yeah, no. I think we're going to continue with the trend of picking the ones I already picked out before, and we're going to be doing The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin for book number 2. This is one that Hope and I meant to read together a while ago, but it never really kind of popped up. But it's, from what I've read of it, the premise is really cool. I think this is something that she would get a lot of enjoyment out of. And typically, I'm not one to always want to torture my partner, so we want to at least give her something I think she'll enjoy. So, yeah, we'll do this one by N.K. Jemisin. Another couch sound. Anyway, this one I'm a little more unfamiliar with because I don't know all the books on here, so... Actually, seeing the title, I know exactly what I'm going to grab. And this will be Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. Know nothing about this. I just like the title. So, they're the 3 books for Hope for January. So, hopefully she likes them. Again, I don't intend to torture her too much. But, you never know. I have accidentally done that before with books. So, let's hope that she doesn't regret this too much. Anyway, curtains out.
Okay, so, as you saw, Jacob chose for me Ninth House, The City We Became, and Bury Your Gaze. And I originally, for the first version of this I tried to film, I tried to predict what he was going to choose for me. And I can tell you right now my predictions were completely wrong. But I'm actually happy that I was wrong because I really like the books that he's chosen for me. I think it's an interesting stack, especially because at least one of those, The City We Became, was one that he and I actually tried to buddy read together. He was having trouble getting into it, so he ended up not finishing it, and I just kind of set it down when he set it down. And I've been meaning to get back to this one for a while because I'm really interested in trying something from N.K. Jemisin. For the other two, I was interested because the Lee Bardugo one, I think he's heard of, and he kind of wants to know if it's any good, if he should pick it up. But for the other, Bury Your Gaze, which is the one that is not in a box and is currently sitting right here on my desk, this one I had just bought like a week or two before he chose it. So this is one that's been very much on my radar currently, and one I've been really excited to pick up. So I feel like it was a really interesting varied stack of things that were a blend of things that have been on my shelf for a while, and things that were a little bit newer, things that I had tried before and kind of bounced off of, and things that I'm really excited for. So I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a really interesting experience, and I can tell you now, going into this next part of the vlog, that I have already started Bury Your Gaze, so I do have some initial thoughts. So I'm currently about halfway through this story, and I'm really enjoying this so far. I think this is one of the most stressful horror books I've ever read, because it does some things with its horror that I haven't seen a lot of other books do, at least in what I've read up to this point. So we're following Misha, who is a writer for a TV show, and he is faced with this problem where the executive board wants him to kill off his queer characters or make them straight for the upcoming season finale. However, he's been building across 3 seasons towards them having a kind of love confession moment, a big kiss. Like, he feels very strongly about that because Misha himself is queer, and for him this is kind of the culmination of decades of not seeing representation for people like himself on screen, and it is really important to him. So he kind of gets stuck in this situation where the board wants something from him that he's not willing to give, and he is basically planning to just ignore them and write what he wants to write. But in the midst of this kind of stressful situation for him, he starts to be haunted by monsters that he's written in the past, because he's primarily a horror writer, or has been previously, and he starts to be haunted by the creatures that he's previously written into his work, which are all based on former traumatic experiences that he had growing up. And he grew up in a small town in Montana, and it's like kind of dealing with his background and the difficulties of growing up queer in small town Montana, the fact that he is still not entirely comfortable with his own identity when he's in interactions with people who know him from his childhood. He's kind of out in Los Angeles where he's living, but not necessarily back home. So he's grappling with his identity. He's grappling with wanting to be open about who he is, but also being afraid of the consequences of doing that. And it's all kind of coming to a head with these characters that are haunting him that are all based on that, like, past formative experiences. So I'm really enjoying this, and I think that the horror in here is really scary, because I'm currently halfway, like just shy of halfway through this book. And there was a scene here that it took me 4 days to read because I was so stressed about it. I kept picking it up and then being like, nope, can't do it, and putting the book down, because a lot of the horror that's happening in this book is happening in broad daylight in front of other people. I think a lot of times in horror books you get this thing where, like, your protagonist will encounter something and they'll be by themselves, it'll be nighttime, it's something kind of creepy, and they can kind of brush it off as like, well, it was just my mind running wild because it was dark, or they believe that something happened, but they can't get anyone else to believe them. Like, other people think they're crazy, or they think that they're making something up. But a lot of the horror that's happening to Misha is also affecting other people. One of the earliest things that happens when he is with his best friend Tara, and so she witnesses it as well. And then he also pulls in his boyfriend Zeke, who is kind of there trying to support him through whatever's going on. But, like, Tara and Zeke are witnessing pieces of what's happening to him. And I think the pieces that have been the most stressful is there's some stuff that's happening in, like, broad daylight in front of complete strangers. And the scene that was stressing me out so bad was taking place on an airplane. And it wasn't just that other people were witnessing what was happening, but that the horror was impacting them as well. Like, horrific things were happening to people who weren't Misha, and he was powerless to do anything about it. And it was so stressful and so well done. And I think it's just been a really interesting exploration of the distress that Misha is feeling in this situation, and the ways that his past haunts him. And it's so interesting. I'm not used to seeing stuff where it happens in broad daylight in front of people, it's impacting strangers, and it's this, like, kind of spiraling outwards of the horror that I think is so effective. So really, really enjoying this, looking forward to reading the rest of it, and I plan to finish this in the next couple of days, and then I probably won't be able to get to the other 2 books until a couple of weeks from now, when I actually am able to unpack all of my boxes. So that's kind of where we're at. That's the plan going forward, and hopefully things will be a little less hectic now, and I'll be able to focus on getting these books read. It took me way too long, but I have finally finished Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. You may also notice that I'm not at my apartment where I live with my partner. This is the other book that I finished. If you saw my other vlog that I made while cat sitting, this is the book that I have finished while I've been here. I finished this evening, and it took me a really long time, but I feel like that does not at all impact my rating of this book. I think it is incredibly memorable, and I thought it was really well written. I'm giving this 4.5 stars. It is just barely shy of a 5-star for some very minor reasons. I think that some of the topics this is covering are really, like, prescient, I think is the word I want, in our current moment, especially in regards to technology. There is something in here, actually the horror in here, turns something that is basically a part of our everyday lives into a literal monster in a way that I think is extremely interesting. And I'm trying to be deliberately vague here because I don't want to spoil that for you. The reveal for what's going on in here is really interesting, and it's a really big twist, and I don't want to spoil that for you if you want to pick this book up. But I really enjoyed this. I think that the horror, again, is very interesting. I think it's asking some really important questions, especially about the media that we make and consume. This is a book about queer horror and the, like, overprevalence of queer tragedy, and is trying to argue for the importance of telling a variety of stories, things that celebrate a range of emotions and investigate difficult topics, but also provide entertainment and also provide, like, light topics, let people see themselves in characters who get to live and thrive. So there's a lot going on in here that I really liked. I think our main character, Misha, is really compelling. He's a writer, he's a screenwriter, and that is actually super important to the way that his character develops and the way that he deals with the situation at hand. And I think this is one of the times where I am most impressed with a character who is a writer. I think a lot of times I've read things where a character is a writer, and that doesn't really play a lot into the actual plot, but Misha being a writer is extremely important to the development of the plot in this one. So I really like the way that that was used. I also really like his little friend group. We get a lot of his best friend Tara, and his boyfriend Zeke. And I think that they're a really great supporting cast. One of my main quibbles about this book, though, is in regards to Zeke. I think that Zeke is massively underutilized. He falls into kind of my least favorite type of character, which is what I call supportive boyfriend man. Like, his only personality trait is that he is here and he is calm and he is supportive, and no matter the horrors happening in the main character's life, he's there and he's supportive and he's not at all, like, frightened or put off by anything. And I wanted Zeke to get to be more complex, because there were some really interesting conversations in here that Misha has with Zeke, but it seems like all of those conversations kind of end before Zeke gets to, like, have a complex emotion about anything. So I really wanted more of him, and I wanted more for him, especially because I really think that the other characters are done so well. It just felt like a weakness there with Zeke. There's another character, Blossom, who kind of disappears. I would have liked to see more of, or at least gotten more resolution on what happens to her in the story, but she was not as central a character as Zeke was. Oh, there's a few points where I feel like the primary thematic development of the book is done through, like, big dramatic monologues, which I think is partially intentional. I think it's kind of a statement on, like, media and the ways that things tend to develop in, like, film and TV through monologues. But there were some moments where I really wanted more of that to happen in the action, instead of having the characters get up and tell me in monologue the theme of the thing that is happening. That said, those moments are still pretty good, and I enjoyed the monologues as they were written. It just felt like there could have been a little more supporting action that also engaged with those themes a little bit more. But overall, I just had a great time with this. The horror is really scary. This is one of the few things I've ever seen where the horror is happening, like, in broad daylight in front of other people, and it's not just, like, chalked up to the character seeing things when no one else is around, or being scared at night and then being told that they're crazy, or that they're just, like, stressed or paranoid or whatever. It was happening, like, in front of other people. He had witnesses. It was also impacting other people. Other people were being harmed by the monsters in interesting ways. I don't think a horror book has ever given me, like, that much anxiety, and I found that really impressive in the way that it was done. So yeah, I think this is really, really solid. It's got some fun mixed media elements in it too. There's some, like, script pieces where parts of the story are told via script, and that ends up being a really big piece that kind of clicks together at the end. So yeah, overall, really, really good. Loved this. Glad that I read it. A little bummed that it's not quite a 5-star, but at the same time, it's fantastic, and I would highly, highly recommend it. I think that's what I just said, but I am tired and also full of effusive praise for Barrier Gaze. I definitely will be reading more from Chuck Tingle after this one. This was really good. I decided to pick up Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo next because I felt like this was, of the two I had left, the one I was the most in the mood for at the time, and I am really enjoying this. I meant to check in earlier, but I'm actually currently halfway through the story because I realized when I was looking at my schedule that to get this up on time, I really need to get both this and the other book done, like, ASAP. So I have already read halfway through, which I think means I can give you a good sense of what the book is about and my general feelings on it. So when we're in this, we're following Alex Stern, who is a young woman who's been struggling with drug addiction. She's been able to see ghosts her whole life, and it's kind of ruined her life. It's created this like isolated situation for her because nobody can understand what she's experiencing. People don't believe her that the ghosts are there, and so she's struggled throughout life, ultimately becomes a drug addict, and at the start of the book we find out that she was approached after this like very horrible event happened, and she's like the sole survivor of it. She's approached by Dean Sandow, who is one of the deans at Yale University. He also happens to be the liaison to Lethe House, which is a secret society that exists to police Yale's other secret societies. There's all of these other societies, and they're all practicing magic. Lethe House exists to just ensure that they're not doing harm to the surrounding community or letting the magic get out of hand. And so she gets pulled into this because he offers her basically a chance at normalcy and also a chance to learn more about like her skills and about the occult and the unknown and the unseen so that she can maybe cope better with this ability that she has to see ghosts. So she gets offered this position, she goes to Yale, and then right at the start of the book we know that something is horrible has happened and that her mentor Darlington is missing. Something has happened, he's gone missing, nobody knows where he is, and they're trying to figure out how to get him back. In the meantime, she has to just kind of continue on with the work of Lethe House in his absence, but she's not prepared to do that because she never got the like full guidance that she was supposed to get from him. And so we're following now kind of two timelines where we get Alex's timeline in the present day where a murder occurs and she gets involved in investigating it, and we get Darlington's history as we're learning about the development of his relationship with Alex and the events that led up to his disappearance, which presumably are going to tie together with the murder. I presume there's going to be like a whole bearer thing because this book is full of basically conspiracies being real. Like there is actually this like global elite that's from these secret societies that are doing magic. So there is, you know, that element. I suspect all of it is going to like come together in the end. I am really enjoying this. I really like Alex as a protagonist, and I think part of it is that I really appreciate that she gets to be someone who has been through horrible things, and she gets to be angry about that. She gets to act out, and she gets to like force people to listen to her. I really appreciate the messiness of Alex, and I also really like Darlington. We're getting some of his sections, and I think he's more nuanced than he could have been. I think there was a really easy way for him to fall into like the privileged rich boy kind of unaware of his privilege kind of archetype, but that's not what we get from him. He is like, he comes from a wealthy family, but he himself is not like wealthy. Like his family has gambled the money away, and he is the last person maintaining the family home, and he's got this like healthy respect for the occult. It's something that's kind of helped him keep moving forward through the dark parts of his life. And he and Alex end up being kind of these direct foils for each other in a really interesting way, where he's always wanted to be able to like see the world as it is, see the unseen parts of the world, but that's the one thing he can't do. He kind of gathers knowledge. That's his thing, is he loves to learn, whereas Alex has always been able to see the world as it is, and she doesn't want to be able to. She wants normalcy. So they're kind of foils for each other, and that kind of is the basis of their relationship, but also leads to this really interesting relationship development between them, as there's almost like a mutual respect that forms between them, and I'm really enjoying the development of that. It seems like it's probably going to get messier, and there's some sort of relationship between them that hasn't been like clarified yet, but clearly it grows in like unexpected ways. And then there's also this like mystery plot that's really interesting. I'm curious to see how it's going to turn out, especially because I feel like this book does a good job of convincing me that Alex doesn't have very many allies, as she is once again kind of on her own for things. She has like a couple of people that are helping her, but some of them quite begrudgingly. And so I feel like the choices that she makes, particularly the reckless ones, really make sense for the character that she is. I appreciate the way that she is like having to be self-sufficient, but that she's good at that. She's good at thinking on her feet. It just comes off as like very believable to me, the way that she is interacting with the situation she's in. So I'm really enjoying this. I'm excited to see where the mystery is going to go. I think at this point I just have one big kind of issue with the book, and I want to talk about it, but I'm gonna have to put a spoiler thing on the screen because I can't really talk about it without going into spoilers. So just heads up, there's going to be some spoilers and also some discussion of sexual assault. That is a pretty big thing that happens in this book, and I want to briefly talk about it. So when the spoiler thing is gone, then it is safe to listen again if you don't want to know what's happening in the book. But yeah, so this book has 2 instances of sexual assault or near sexual assault so far in the first half. I don't know what may come of it in the last half, and this is part of why I want to like reserve judgment on this particular piece. But I think that the way it has dealt with it so far, I'm not loving. We basically get 2 instances, one of them being against Alex. We find out that when she was a young child, she was essentially raped by a ghost, and nobody believed her, like nobody would listen to her, and so she's never been able to really like process or deal with what happened to her. It's what made her very afraid of the Greys, or the ghosts here. They're called Greys in this universe, and it impacts her ability to do her job at Lethe House, but also like impacts her entire life. Like that is the tipping point for Alex, where her life starts to go down this darker path of addiction and self-destruction. And so I feel like that scene just goes a little further than it needs to. I don't think that the actual like graphic details of her experience needed to be there to sell a 12-year-old being terrified of the ghost that she now knows can actually touch her. And I feel like if it had stopped at just she's being like physically assaulted by a ghost, I still would have believed that that made her frightened of them, that she realized that they were there and nobody could see them and they could hurt her. I feel like it just goes a little bit gratuitous. It goes a little bit like putting the reader in the position of the voyeur, the way that it's written. And this was an issue I had too with A Strange and Stubborn Endurance, although I think that's much more egregious than this is. This is a very short scene, but I just don't feel like it was necessary to sell the idea that Alex would be scared of the ghosts. And then I don't think it carries over well into her other interactions, because the later instance of it, Darlington gets drugged and he's having this like hallucination of Alex as Queen Mab from Shakespeare, because she's dressed as Queen Mab, it's Halloween. But he's having this hallucination, and it's really like exploring his like relationship to her, and this idea that she has the one thing that he's never had, which is the ability to see the unseen side of the world. And that he's struggling with that, but also that he almost feels like a knight who serves her, like she's his queen and he's the knight. And so it's kind of a reversal of their roles of like mentor and mentee. But then the scene ends with him coming to because Alex bites him, and he realizes that he's been like hiking up her skirt and is like grabbing her legs, and she's trying to push him away. And I don't like the way it deals with this, because immediately after this they both leave the party. They're like, we gotta get out of here, this is clearly bad. And also like the party goers, or the society that's running the party, should not have been messing with him in the first place. He should not have been drugged, but they did it intentionally. And so that's gonna be a whole big deal. But immediately after leaving, I feel like given her background, especially given that we have this earlier scene of her being sexually assaulted, she is very, very quick to brush the whole thing off and be like, relax, man, it's okay, it's not a problem. And then his only concerns about it, I feel like, are he's being done dirty here, because his only concern is that he's thinking like, one, he's kind of guilty that he's done this to Alex, and he's the one who's immediately like, oh, I'm so sorry, I understand if you can't work with me anymore. And she's immediately like, no, man, it's okay, you were drugged, it's fine. And he's the one that feels bad about it. But also, it doesn't really get addressed as like a violation of Darlington or a violation of his consent. His only concern is it is a breach in the protocols, that like Lethe House is not supposed to be messed with when they are overseeing a ritual, and that was a like clear and intentional break in that protocol by manuscript. And I don't appreciate that it just brushes by the fact that Darlington himself is also in a way here assaulted, and his consent is completely violated. It doesn't really go into that at all, and I felt like it needed to just be addressed better. I don't know if that may come up again, if maybe it comes up later, we get more conversations with him about it. I don't know, because I haven't read that far, but kind of at this point, I'm a little frustrated with the way that this book is handling sexual assault, and the way that it is, like, presenting it and using it as a story beat. I don't think that that's done as well as I would like, given the sensitivity and the darkness of that particular topic. That's not to say that I don't think that that can and should be a topic in books. Like, I think it's one of the things that literature allows us to explore in a safe environment and like explore the implications and the consequences of it. But I just don't feel like this is doing it that well. So that's the end of the spoiler section, and that's my frustration with it. Other than that, I'm having a good time. I'm enjoying the characters. I like the story, and I'm really looking forward to reading the latter half and seeing what happens. I'm hopeful that this will finish strong, and I'll be excited to read the second book, Hellbent. But at this point, I don't really know what's going on. So that's why I'm kind of reserving my judgment on that point. I don't want to like say, well, it's horrible, because I don't know what may yet come in the second half. But I'm looking forward to figuring it out. So that's kind of where I'm at with Ninth House. I have actually started The City We Became, so we can also talk about that like very briefly. I've read just the prologue and I have the audiobook for it, so I'm going to be listening to this and doing more of an immersion read with this one. We're kind of alternating between the two depending on what my, day is looking like. But I'm really enjoying this so far too. N.K. Jemisin's writing is incredible already just in the prologue. It's really like evocative, and I feel like I'm seeing these scenes like it's a movie. It's doing a really great job of describing things. The characters are immediately like really vibrant, really well fleshed out, and I'm just having a great time with the premise where we're following someone who is like the avatar of New York City, but New York City, as it turns out, has 6 avatars. And one of the things that happens when a city like comes to life as its own entity is its avatar or avatars are chosen and become like aware of their connection to the city. But there is also something not only as the entity that's some sort of like eldritch being that is trying to prevent the city from being born. And that's kind of the setup, is that there's this like ancient conflict between the cities and this entity that wants to destroy them, and there is the other like cities that are trying to, or there are other cities that are trying to find the avatars and prepare them for the battle that is to come. So I'm really enjoying that. I think it's a really clever version of a kind of Eldritch Lovecraftian type horror, and I'm really enjoying the way that it is like drawing New York City. I think this one and Ninth House both very much feel like love letters to a specific place, and I'm really just enjoying the vibe of this. So I'm really excited to read more of this one as well. I've done it. I've successfully completed Ninth House. I just finished this one, and I gotta say, I had a much better time with this than I was anticipating. I actually really enjoyed this, and I think I'm gonna give it 4.5 stars. This was really fun and compelling, and I just found myself wanting to pick it up and read it. Like, I could not put this book down, and I really enjoyed all of the characters. I think that all of them get to feel like really well developed and well fleshed out, and they feel like real people. They're all pretty nuanced, and I really like the way that Alex's relationships develop with everyone across the course of the story as she is like making friendships and like reaching new people, getting to know new people. I especially like that because there's this kind of recurring thing about like Alex is a survivor. She'll do anything it takes to survive. But it becomes clear throughout the story that Alex is a survivor, yes, but she's not really willing to necessarily like screw other people over to save herself. Like, it almost seems like people expect her to be that kind of person, and there's at least one instance where she does that and then she feels horrifically guilty, and there's a number of times where she goes out of her way to help somebody else even though it causes her more problems. So I really like her characterization. I think she's really fun and interesting to follow. I like watching her grow in her confidence and in her abilities across the course of the story, and I just really enjoyed it. I had a great time. The mystery is really good. There's some great twists in here. There is at least one really big twist. I like the way that it changes kind of the trajectory of the characters' emotional arcs partway through. And there's at least one twist that I kind of guessed. I kind of had a sense from early on who the bad guy / bad guys were going to be, and I was right on that, but I liked the way that it was revealed. I liked the way that all of those pieces came together, and it felt fair. It felt like the clues were all right there in front of you, so you could absolutely follow along and like figure out the mysteries alongside Alex. So I really appreciated that. I still think there is too much rape and sexual assault in this book for what it's doing. It ultimately is about violence against women and like people committing violence against women to further their own power, their own like interests. So like, I do think that that comes full circle in a really interesting way, and I like the ending and how that is dealt with at the end, but it feels like there's too much rape and sexual assault kind of sprinkled into so much seasoning. I think I talked about there being some of that in an earlier section, and in the latter half of the book there are 2 more instances of it. So 4 total instances of rape or sexual assault or attempted assault throughout the book, and it started to feel like too much. I think there's one of those instances that makes sense for it to be there. It does something to further the plot, but also to further some major character journeys. So like there's one instance where I get why it's included, but the other three I felt like were just extra. They didn't really add anything to that exploration of its theming around violence against women. So yeah, I feel like because so much of it is on page, I also understand that it's very common and many women and other people are victims of sexual assault, are victimized through that kind of violence. I understand that it is common, and I think that's something we really ought to be talking about, but I feel like the way it's used here, it just starts to feel gratuitous. I don't think it's really talking about that exactly, and it just starts to feel like they're just there for shock value in a couple of cases. Didn't love how that was handled. That's why I'm docking it half a star. I was gonna give it 4 stars, but I ended up loving the ending of this, so that was what kind of brought it back up to 4.5 for me. So that was a success. Glad I read it. Definitely gonna be picking up the sequel, Hellbent. I'm gonna have to get a hold of that at some point, and I will wait patiently with everyone else as we wait to get the 3rd book in the series. I'm curious to see what happens when I continue it though, because I know that I've seen a lot of people say that they didn't like Hellbent as well as they liked Ninth House. So I'm curious to see how I feel about that, because I often have opposing opinions on books that are deemed kind of broadly unpopular. So I'm curious to see how I'll end up feeling about that. But now I'm going to move on to our final book fully. I have been reading a little bit of The City We Became, but now I'm gonna fully move on and try to finish it. And I'll check back in with my final thoughts, hopefully tomorrow, because this video is supposed to go up 2 days from now. Apologies for the weird filming angle, but I have just settled in for the evening to read the rest of The City We Became, and I decided to lay down and read for a while because I don't know if you can hear it, but we're actually having a pretty big storm here, so I wanted to go ahead and like shut off my computer just in case and kind of move away from my desk. So I figured like why not get comfy and finish the rest of this book. Feels like a good use of a stormy night to me. But halfway through, I am really enjoying this. This is about New York City, and it's a version of reality where cities become an entity, basically. And through that process, what's referred to several times as like a birthing process, the city gains avatars, or usually one, sometimes multiple. In the case of New York City, there's 6 of them, 1 for each of the 5 boroughs, and 1 that represents the city as a whole. But the city gains avatars and basically comes to life and becomes an entity of its own that is sort of living through the people, but also the people are a part of the city. It's an interesting concept, and it's fairly unexplained for the most part, but we're following that process in New York City as all the avatars are finding out that they're avatars and the city's coming to life. But during that process, every time this happens to a city, there is an eldritch interdimensional entity that like shows up and tries to prevent the cities from coming to life. For reasons so far unexplained, I suspect they may remain unexplained, but for whatever reason, this entity shows up and tries to prevent cities from coming to life. Usually I think by killing the avatars and things like that. So that's what we're following in this story. We're just following the various avatars of New York as they are trying to deal with the situation. They're trying to come to terms with what's happening and figure out how to defeat this enemy that is trying to stop them. And that's pretty much it. That's the story. I'm really enjoying the characters though. I feel like that's the strongest piece of this. All of the different avatars of New York are really, really distinctive. I think that they're really believable as real people, and they're all dealing with becoming an avatar of the city in different ways. They'll have different feelings about it, and I just appreciate the way that that is presented and explored, the ways that these people are dealing with this weird situation. I also really love all the side characters. I think they're really fun, and I feel like, again, they're all like quite believable. And beyond the characters, I think that the writing is just really solid. It's really evocative and is really just fun to read. There's this one line that I really like that kind of jumped out to me as an example of what I was liking about the writing, where the avatar of Manhattan is like sticking his head out a window, and he's getting kind of a dirty look from one of the other avatars, and he is of the group. He's the only one who's not originally from New York, so he's like just moved there and now has become an avatar of the city. And so there's a line that says, "He can't help it, he's falling in love with the city, and men in love are rarely considerate or wise." And I just thought that was a really fun quote. It really jumped out to me and has obviously like kind of stuck in my brain as I've continued to read. But I was really enjoying this. It's a good time. That said, I do have a couple of complaints about it. Both I think are getting better in the latter half. I've just crossed over into the second half of the book. But I think the first half feels kind of repetitive because it's basically like each avatar becoming an avatar. Except for Brooklyn, her story starts up a little bit differently, but we get just a series of an avatar finding out they're an avatar or starting to have weird things happen to them. Then the eldritch enemy shows up and like harasses them for a little bit and threatens them or whatever, or tries to sway them to its side. Shows up, has some sort of little interaction with them, leaves, or is driven away. And it's just like that several times over. And I think that that starts to feel a little bit repetitive. We get a little bit more information about the entity each time, but it starts to feel like it's the same thing over and over again in a way that I found a little bit boring. And my other issue is that no one freaks out about what's going on. Everybody just accepts that they've become an avatar of New York. They're just like, oh, I am an avatar, and suddenly I know everything about this. Or not everything, but they're like, I suddenly know exactly what's happening and why I'm the avatar of New York, or why I'm the avatar of this particular borough. And like, they don't have any questions about it. No one freaks out and tries to refuse the responsibility. There's one person who's trying to refuse responsibility, but not in a like, no, this can't be happening kind of way, but yeah, this is happening, I don't want to be a part of it kind of a way. And like, that extends also to the side characters. Like, there's various people around them who are witnessing them do very weird things, or like with them when they're like, oh, I'm an avatar of the city of New York, and nobody is having like any kind of second guessing of themselves or of the people around them. There's never a point where one of the side character goes, what the hell, you're crazy, what are you talking about, that's not real, or they get shown something and they just immediately believe it. Nobody goes, oh, I'm hallucinating, or oh, I'm having a bad trip or something. Like, nobody second guesses anything. And so I'm finding that just a little bit boring as well, that I want there to be more conflict over that. They just all accept it so easily with like no conflict at all. And I think it's the best way I could describe it is it feels like the first half of the book is a little bit frictionless. There's just no obstacles to these people becoming avatars, and when they become the avatars, they just like follow their instincts and they know exactly what to do to solve each situation. And I'm finding that just a little bit boring. It's kind of taking out the conflict for me, and I want just a little bit more from the plot, I guess. It's mostly been more character study, but it's set up this really interesting premise for a kind of strong horror-ish fantasy plot, but I feel like it's not really utilizing that plot to its full potential. Other than that, I am having a really good time, and it's starting to pick up now that I'm moving into the second half. We've had some more exciting things happen. I particularly like the part where the Queen's avatar becomes an avatar. I really like her kind of introduction section. She's really cool, and I like the way that it's based in mathematics. I thought that was a really fun detail. So, having a good time, a couple of small qualms with it. Feeling better about it going into the second half would be the too long didn't read for this section, or too long didn't listen. So now I'm gonna go try and read the last half of this book this evening, and hopefully maybe somehow get the video edited as well. Video's supposed to go up tomorrow. We'll see. I'm gonna do my best, but I am having a good time, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to end up playing out. Back at my desk because the storm has calmed down, but I just wanted to check in real quick. I'm not quite done. I think I've got about 100 pages left, but I just had to check in because I got to a line that I have to comment on, because there's a bit where kind of the boroughs, several of them are together now, with the one borough who's gotten like the most information. She's the oldest of the group, and so she was gifted by the city with like the most information about what's actually going on, and she's now trying to explain some things to the other boroughs. But there's this line as they're kind of talking about like why it took them so long to find her, and one of them says, none of us really understands how this works or why it's happened to us, so naturally we've had a lot of denial to work through first. And I have to comment on that, because I really think that that's not true. The way the first half of the book is written, there's not really at any point a moment where any of the other boroughs try to deny what's happening or don't believe that what's happening is real. None of them tries to like walk away from it all. They're just like, oh, I guess I'm a burrow now, guess I'm gonna go on this little adventure. And I just like, I had to comment on that because I that caught me kind of off guard, and I was like, I don't think that's what's actually happened. I'm enjoying it. At this point, I'm also really liking some of the side relationships that are forming. There's a really interesting relationship between the Bronx and a friend of hers who works in the same building as her. They both work for an art center, and the friend is a much younger woman, and she has this sort of like mother-daughter-ish relationship with her, and it's just like a really sweet friendship. I really like the Bronx and Vanessa. I really like their relationship and the way that that's progressing, and the way that Vanessa is like stepping up to help. I really like that bit. And then I also am really interested in Iceland, who is the Staten Island avatar. She has a really interesting relationship to her family, and in particular we get to see this moment between her and her mother where like her understanding of her mother and her mother's story completely gets flipped on its head, and that's part of the catalyst that sends Iceland to kind of accepting what's going on and understanding what's happening to her. And I really enjoyed that piece. I think that conversation is really interesting. So yeah, there's a lot of really great relationships in here, some really great moments. There are some characters I wish would come up again, because like Manhattan's roommate Belle has not shown up again at all. We get a little glimpse of Brooklyn's family, and I really like that bit. I think that's really great. She has a really sweet relationship with her daughter, and yeah, there's like a lot of really great moments, but there's some pieces I feel like have kind of dropped off. In particular, also, there's something with Brooklyn's family. There's like this big, like, stressful moment that happens where the big reveal of something that's going on, and that just kind of dropped and it hasn't been mentioned again in quite a while now. And I think that happens in a couple of instances, or something stressful happens and then it gets resolved really easily in a way that I feel like, again, has that sort of frictionless quality to it, where anything that's not directly between the boroughs and this like eldritch entity just gets resolved too easily. There's no other obstacles for them. So I'm having a good time, but I am still having some of those same kind of issues with the feeling of the plot. I think it's just a little bit frictionless. I'm probably going to say that word 50 more times because I think that's the one that best explains my feeling about it. But I am still having a great time, and I'm down to about 100 pages, a little more than 100 pages, and I'm going to try and polish this off tonight. Well, in true Hope fashion, I finished the book, but not the video. So I know I'll be editing this probably during my lunch break today. But I have finished this. I did really enjoy it. I think overall my feelings on it kind of remain the same. I think that it gets more fun and more interesting in the last half. We lose that repetitiveness that the first half has. We get a lot more action. We get a lot more information about the process of cities becoming alive and how that is like impacting the world, what that means for the avatars themselves. We learn more about how people become avatars. We learn a lot more about the enemy, which I think was maybe my favorite part. I liked learning about her and what like her goal was, and I really enjoyed the way that she almost seemed like she had a point. Like you could almost be like, oh, okay, I get why she's doing this, and then she would say something out of left field and be like, oh no oh no, never mind, she does not have a point. So I really liked the way that was done, and I felt like the information we got in the second half was just really interesting, but I think I would have liked if this was either shorter or more of that was kind of sprinkled throughout, because I think that contributed to this feeling of like nothing is happening and we're not really learning that much. We're kind of following on these characters who don't know anything about what's going on but seem to just kind of accept what's going on, and then latter half we get lots of new information. So I really liked this. I think it just retained that kind of frictionless quality throughout. In the second half, we also have a lot of conflicts that ultimately get resolved really quickly in a way that felt, again, that frictionless is still just the best word I can think of it. I can think of to describe it, because these characters would encounter something that would seem like this really big challenge, and then it would either just get dropped and not be brought up again, or it would get resolved within a couple of pages, and it just felt like they never really had any significant obstacles that kept them from their goal. That said, I did really enjoy the ending. I think the ending is fun. It still has that issue of it feels resolved a little too easily, a little too quickly, but I like how this played out in the end. kind of on a different level of the book, I really liked the way that this book represented gentrification and fascism, which were kind of big ideas here, and I really like the ways that it wove that into its horror, into the kind of eldritch side of things. I liked the way it was using those ideas and representing them and how the characters were interacting with them. So I think that that was really well done, and I liked the way that the relationships between the different avatars developed in the latter half. We had all those really great relationships between the avatars and people in their lives in the first half, which continued to be true in the second half, but I think we also got a lot more development between the avatars in the latter half as they were kind of gathering together and interacting with each other more. So yeah, I think this overall is really solid. I am interested to read the second book in this duology. I do want to finish it off and see how things play out. I also am interested to read more from N.K. Jemisin. I think just plot and pacing wise, this didn't totally work for me, but I can see why N.K. Jemisin is such a beloved author. So yeah, that is my last book for Shelf Control episode 1, and I have to say, this is a really, really successful episode 1. I ended up reading these 3 books, which I gave 4.5 stars for Bury Your Gaze, and then I did decide to round down Ninth House to 4 stars. I think I originally said 4.5, but I'm giving it 4 stars because I think upon reflection it has some pacing issues that I think frustrated me, and I don't like the way that it discussed sexual assault. I don't think it was handled as well as it could have been. So I am rounding that one down to 4, but that's still a solid rating for me. And then The City We Became, also a 4-star, just for those kind of pacing and plotting issues I mentioned before. So overall, I feel really, really good about that being my first episode of Shelf Control. Like, really, really successful. I am excited to continue those 2 series. I'm definitely going to be reading more from Chuck Tingle as well, and I could not be happier with how this has gone. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you enjoy this format. Also, if you have any ideas of ways I could pick books, I've got a few others kind of on my list, but I'm trying to kind of keep it fresh and interesting, so I want to do something different each episode, and would love new ideas if you happen to have any. So I think that's pretty much all I have for you today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.